Okay, today on Spring Holler Farm, what we're going to talk about is some common mistakes people make when they're drying firewood. Now, so many people think, oh, you just take that big old log and split it in 4 chunks and let it sit there for a couple of months and throw it in the log wood burner. Well, you can do that. You're going to have problems, though. You're going to have low heat, lots of smoke, and creosote clogging up your chimney in no time. Why? Because it won't be dry yet. There's no way it's going to get dry that quickly. Now, what are some tips and tricks to getting your firewood to dry? What are some mistakes that people make first of all? Well, first of all, what a lot of people do is, like I just told you, they cut their firewood into big chunks. I'll give you an example of one of those big chunks. Right here. A lot of people like a big old clunk like that. Look at the size of that piece of wood. You see what I use it for? Holding down the cover on the top of my wood. I'll probably use that for firewood next year when it dries out some more. Maybe I'll split it again. And that brings us to one thing that you need to keep in mind. You don't want to split your wood in big chunks like that. I know people say, oh, I want a nice big overnighter. A nice big log like that not going to last overnight any longer than a bunch of small ones stacked in your wood burner. Trust me, I do it all the time. A stack of smaller pieces in there not only is going to last just as long, maybe longer, but it's going to throw twice as much heat because it has more surface area to keep throwing heat. Whereas that big lunk like that, it's just going to sit there and smolder. It's going to make smoke. It's going to make creosote. It's not going to make a lot of heat. Now take a look at this. First of all, another thing that people do is they'll split their wood and then they'll put it up against a building and maybe cover it with a tarp to keep the rain off of it. It's not what you want. Look where my wood stack is. Look what's behind it. A whole lot of nothing. And the same thing on this other side. It's got that far to the house, wide open in the backyard, wide open in the front. And look at all the trees that aren't in the way. It's right out in all day sun, plenty of wind, facing north-south, so that's the prevailing wind, north and west and south. So it gets plenty of wind, plenty of airflow. A lot of people don't give their stack enough airflow. And you'll notice in between, you see in between there, a lot of people, they stack their two, if they double stack like this, they'll put them right up next to one another. Always want to leave. You always want to leave like 6 or 8 inches in there so the air can get in and get through there and dry them pieces of wood out. Another mistake people make when they're stacking firewood, and this is a big one. Do you see how I stack it? It's stacked tightly, but not too tightly. Because if the air can't get through between the pieces of wood, if they stack too close together, too smoothly, they won't dry. They'll just mold in between. I've seen it. And that's one thing that concerns me about the sawmill back there. We have all that offcuts from the sawmill. They're going to be hard to get them to stack right because they have so many flat edges, and they're going to want to lay flat one on top of the other. So it's going to be a little tricky to stack those. We'll figure that out when the time comes. And you can see here, like in one of my recent videos though, we got 2.5 inches of rain. Look at my wood. It's covered. You know how much them covers cost me? Nothing. Not a penny. They're just scrap stuff. Didn't cost me anything. Just like that over there. Pool cover that I already had and never used. It was still in the original wrapper from several years ago. Basically cost me nothing at this point. So that's a couple of mistakes people make. They don't have enough airflow and they don't have the wood stacked. Basically, that's still not enough airflow. And you also, like I said, you want to make sure it's out in the open where it gets lots of sunlight, lots of wind. Those are the most important things. And a lot of people think, oh, the sunlight's the most important. No. Sunlight's nice. It's a nice bonus, but airflow is more important than sunlight. Because the sunlight doesn't really hit most of the wood. Most of the wood is stacked underneath other wood. But the airflow, you know what contributes to that airflow? Like we said earlier, you don't want great big chunks like that. So how do you want to split your wood? what way should you have your wood split? Well, I've got a couple of pieces up here I wanted to show you. Now, yeah, some of my pieces are cut a little bit bigger, but that's because the pieces that when I split them, they were already most of the way dry. They were standing dead wood. If you cut green wood, it's about 45% moisture. Standing dead is about 25% moisture. So I could kind of get away with that. And some of these were a little bit punky on the inside, which means they were even closer to dry already. So they were okay. But oak, especially white oak, it only dries at a rate of about 1 inch to 1.5 inches, depending on where you live, in a year. So it'll dry out for 1 inch to 1.5 inches all the way around in a year. So this right here, if you look at it, it's about 1.5 inches all the way through one way and about 2 inches the other. So guess what this piece of wood is? It's really dry. That is what you're looking for. That, or let's see if I can find one. There's a good one. I make a lot of these. I make a lot of these pieces here, about like that. That is a perfect piece of firewood right there. Perfect. And if you don't have any other way to tell whether your wood is dry or not, give it the clink test. Many people have seen Hogan's Heroes. Those who haven't, I recommend it. It's a really good show. But anyway, there was a colonel on there. His name was Colonel Clink. When you take two pieces of wood and knock them together, if they don't make kind of a sound that goes clink, they're not really dry enough yet. You might get away with burning them, but you don't want them to go thud. You definitely don't want them to go thud. They might go clunk instead of clink, and that's probably okay. But that sharp clink is the sound you want them to make. That way you know they're truly dry and ready to be burned. But there's a better way. You know what that is. You know what I'm going to say, right? I've mentioned it before. Moisture meter. They're not that expensive. $20 to buy a pretty decent moisture meter. And you can just stick it in there and it'll tell you how dry your wood is or isn't. But having dry wood is very important. Why? Well, mostly for two reasons. One, dry wood gives off a lot more heat. Because if wood's wet, you have to use up some of that heat to boil away the moisture so that it can burn. And that goes up the chimney in the form of steam instead of out into your house in the form of heat. But the other more important thing is that dry wood burns clean. What do I mean by that? Well, that means you don't have any creosote building up in your chimney, or at least a lot less. You want to burn a hot fire at least once a day. Let it burn through a pile of wood. Load it up, let it burn all the way out, or all the way down to coals, and with it pretty open, so it's burning a nice hot fire, and get the chimney cleaned out. It's better to burn that creosote out a little bit every day than it is to let it build up for a month and then have a chimney fire. Chimney fires cause a lot of house fires. They're very dangerous, so you don't want to have creosote buildup. You don't want to have a chimney fire. And one other thing I recommend too, I use it. It does not replace a good chimney cleaning. I would never say to do anything like that to try to replace a good chimney cleaning, but get you a product similar to that. Now they make the logs too, but the logs are more expensive. This right here, it's about $17, $18 for that bucket, 2-pound bucket. You put in a scoop like once a week, throw it on a bed of hot coals, and what it does is it chemically dries out the creosote so that it brushes away easier, and it helps prevent it from burning. So that's a good thing to do in between brushings, of course. I strongly recommend you get your chimney brushed out good. Once you get through the early part of the season where you have a bunch of small fires, when you start needing really hot fires, get up there and get your chimney good and clean right before the really cold season, and then do it again towards the end of the season. When you think it might be the last fire or one of the last fires, get up there and run a brush through it. And in another video that I just made not too long ago, a week or so ago, not even, there's some tricks on how to clean your chimney. It's something you might want to do when you build your chimney if you haven't put one in yet. could save you a lot of time and trouble. So that is the basics. Number one, make sure you stack your wood out in the open where it gets plenty of sun and plenty of wind. Number two, make sure that you split your wood small enough so that it can dry. Because like I said, oak only dries an inch or an inch and a half in a year. So I usually split mine in March, or before, and start burning it in November. So I don't even have a whole year. So I try to get it to where if it dries an inch on either side, that gives you 2 inches thick. I try to keep mine 2.5 inches thick, no more than that. And mine's standing dead. If it was green, I'd go with even smaller pieces. And so you've got out in the open, good wind, good sun, split small. Once the fall comes, you want to get it covered before the rainy season comes. If it rains on it in the summer, it's not a big deal. The sun's going to burn it off and it'll dry right out. But when you get into the cooler season, it gets rained on. It stays wet for a while. So you want to get it covered. That's also important. So thank you very much for watching. Check below for links. I always put links that will help support the channel if you buy from those links. Even if you don't buy what's on the link, shop around afterwards. Maybe you'll find something you do want. Whenever you shop on Amazon, use one of my links. I get a little bit of that money. Trust me, it's not a whole lot. But it doesn't cost you anything extra, and it helps the channel out. And like, subscribe if you haven't. We need subscribers. And we'll see you next time on Spring Holler Farm.